The Washington Morris Salomon sculpture's very existence was to make the case that unity between ethnic groups as well as between civilians and the military led to the unlikely American victory over the British. The statue was meant to signify the Jewish contribution to the American experience. Salomon emigrated from Poland to New York City before war broke out between Great Britain and the 13 colonies. He used his position as a shopkeeper to inform the American Army about the British occupiers. In 1778, British forces arrested Salomon as a spy and sentenced him to death. As he awaited his fate in one of the infamous prisoner of war ships that floated ominously along the Brooklyn shore, the British Army realized that Salomon was multilingual and therefore could be of some assistance. He was particularly helpful as a translator for the British in their interactions with Hessian troops and French prisoners of war. In time, however, the British realized that under Salomon's watch, American and French prisoners began to escape. After Salomon orchestrated numerous escapes, he too fled, making his way to Philadelphia, where he remained for the rest of his life. There he forged connections with founding fathers such as Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. Eventually, Salomon earned the attention and confidence of the American Confederacy's finance minister, Robert Morris. During the remainder of the war, Salomon gained fame for his financial acumen, especially brokering bills of exchange, as well as for his generosity toward delegates to the Continental Congress while they labored in Philadelphia under personal financial constraints. Barnett Hodes had an affinity with Salomon. Both were Polish Jews who were intensely patriotic. When Hodes moved to Evanston, Illinois, to study law at Northwestern University and eventually made his home and career in Chicago, his idea to rectify the historical gap of the Jewish revolutionary story remained with him. The idea finally came to a head when he and fellow Chicagoans spearheaded an organization called the Patriotic Foundation of Chicago, which hoped to strengthen the traditional spirit of American unity. Founded in July 1936, this group, whose membership consisted of Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, philanthropists and politicians, business leaders and artists, set out to make Hodes' dream a reality. They were able to make this dream a reality because of the organization's strategy of depicting three men of different heritage rather than one. The proposed and eventual statue did not celebrate Salomon the man, or Solomon the Jew, or Solomon the hero of the American Revolution. Rather, a statue featuring Salomon was meant to symbolize the role of minority groups in the founding of the United States. And by minority groups, however, Hodes made it clear in his correspondence that he meant Jews. In the wake of the failed attempt by the Federation of Polish Jews in New York City, the decision to link Salomon to Washington and Morris was a clever one that led to success in Chicago. The key was to present to Chicago not a Jewish monument, but an American one. Not a monument that celebrated a Jewish American hero in particular, but one that displayed in bronze the American values of diversity and unity as exemplified by Jewish participation. Hodes' quest for the Washington Morris Salomon Monument rode a wave of Americanism and patriotism that began to emerge in the 1930s and early 1940s as international events and the rise of fascism threatened American life. To create the statue, Barnett Hodes approached Laredo Taft, one of the nation's premier sculptors. The artist was known in the Chicago area for pieces such as Eternal Silence, 1908, Fountain of the Great Lakes, 1913, and The Fountain of Time, 1922. When Hodes made his request, Taft, a Gentile descendant of American revolutionaries, happily agreed to the commission. The two men, no doubt, were acutely aware of the growing anti-Semitism in a city that was home to roughly 300,000 Jews. Supporters argued that the proposed memorial would serve an educational purpose and help save democracy. And it was American democracy that acted as a safeguard for Jews as well as other minority groups such as Catholics. The Washington Morris Salomon statue was the last commissioned work of Laredo Taft. The artist embraced the project because he enthusiastically believed in the mission of the Patriotic Foundation of Chicago. However, he was unable to see it to its completion. The famed sculptor died in October 1936. As Taft lay dying, he extracted a promise from his son-in-law, Paul H. Douglas, professor of economics at the University of Chicago and future war hero and U.S. Senator, that it would be completed. A realistic and concerned Hodes discussed with Taft a way to protect what would be an obvious target for Nazi supporters and other anti-Semites. They concluded that they would have the Patriots join hands. Besides giving the finished product a striking appearance, it would, at the same time, underscore the message of unity as well as minimize the chances that the statue of Solomon would be harmed. Hodes later said that he went to Laredo Taft and induced him to interlock Washington's and Solomon's arms. In that way, Hodes said, any disfigurement of Solomon would also have injured Washington and would have been a national disgrace. Douglas set to work right away to fulfill his promise. He wrote letter after letter to friends explaining the need to see the project through. Sculptor and former Taft student Leonard Cornell took on the task of turning Taft's model into a monument. Governor Harry Nice of Maryland stated that Chicago's graphic symbol in memory of Solomon's service makes me pause to give recognition to the fact that our country is a beautiful mosaic of all social and religious patterns. The Patriotic Foundation of Chicago needed to raise $50,000 for the statue. While a few affluent individuals offered to pay for the statue, Hodes believed that the spirit with which the statue was being erected demanded that people across the social and economic spectrum contribute, even if it took longer to accomplish. Consequently, the funds were raised by popular subscription as well as fundraisers. On December 15, 1941, the Washington Morris Salomon statue was dedicated in Chicago. Ostensibly, the purpose of the monument was to symbolize that the success of the War for Independence was achieved through tolerance, diversity, sacrifice, and unity, the united efforts of different ethnic groups, as well as the cooperation between the military and civilians. The monument was imagined, in the words of its sculptor, Laredo Taft, as a powerful sermon in bronze and granite of the importance of unity amongst America's diverse people, and in crucial times of civilian as well as military sacrifice and preparedness. The message of Hodes and the Patriotic Foundation of Chicago was especially important on this day in Chicago, when the attack on Pearl Harbor, which had just taken place a week earlier, was still foremost on everyone's minds. Timed to coincide with the anniversary of the Bill of Rights, and coincidentally with the first day of Hanukkah, the statue's message became even more pertinent as a new war would demand participation from all ethnic groups and cooperation between the military and civilian populations at an unprecedented level. At 11:30 a.m. on December 15, 1941, people began to gather at Hill Square. Movie stars, well-known radio and theater performers, and the United States Navy Band entertained the crowd as they waited for the program to begin at 1 o'clock. By the time it started, 5,000 people had assembled to witness the dedication of the Washington Morris Salomon Monument. Those in attendance watched the presentation of colors and listened to speeches from politicians, military officials, and religious figures, including a Presbyterian minister, a Roman Catholic priest, and a rabbi from the congregation in Philadelphia, the same religious community to which Salomon once belonged. The need for unity to defeat the latest enemy of American liberties was the day's theme. Now, on this wintry afternoon, the speakers and their audience were linked to the American War for Independence in a way that few could have imagined just weeks before. However, the public celebration and dedication of the monument de-emphasized Solomon's Jewishness. In fact, the pamphlet that was prepared for the day fails to make any specific reference to Jewish participation in the War for Independence or to Solomon as a Jew. While this was in stark contrast to the letters and newspaper articles that discussed the project from its conception through its dedication, it was exactly what Hodes had planned to do to make this monument a success. His Jewish hero of the American Revolution would be on an American monument, not a Jewish one. The monument was a realization of Hodes' quest to make the Jewish story part of the American narrative by building a patriotic monument in downtown Chicago, as opposed to in an ethnic neighborhood, that celebrated a Jewish American revolutionary alongside Washington and Morris. While the unique statue depicting the three patriots was meant to reinforce Americanism, It remained and remains for many, especially in the Jewish American community, a statue dedicated to the memory of a Jewish patriot of the American Revolution.